say the mission of the company that we are interested in usually will have to do with the inner world rather than the outer world. So it's not about creating another convenience to save people time or luxury or gadget that somehow will entertain people. We're more interested in things that will really go deep and to help people with their inner development. And inner development can range from mental health, which is the traditional way to growing spiritually. And for us, it's a continuum. Mental health and spirituality is a continuum rather than a 0 to 1 to infinity kind of a black and white thing. That's the first thing. Second thing is we're looking for scalability. That we're looking for things that would have the potential to help a lot of people. The investment we're primarily interested in is scale, that has the potential to scale to help a lot of people. I would say the third thing is sustainability, that this company has the potential as a pathway to sustain itself. It doesn't have to maximize profit, it doesn't need to be worth $1 billion or whatnot, but we need to see that this company has a revenue model, has a defensible model that could at least pay for the costs and continue, that's another third thing. And the fourth thing is that, the company still needs to show evidence that it's run with rigor and discipline, just like a traditional business. And we're not looking to, competitions. We're not saying competition is bad and whatnot. In fact, I think the company that will scale and impact the most people are companies who are run in a very rigorous and disciplined fashion, just like traditional businesses. I think the best way as a channel to contact us is the email address contact@evolvefoundation.net. And you see that on our Evolve Foundation's website, contact@evolvefoundation.net. And we will definitely look at every single email we receive. I think we'll probably most likely respond, but I can't promise we'll respond to everyone, but for sure we look at everyone in detail. Pitching in tonight's environment is probably not the best thing because it's hard for me to remember anything. So it's in this group. So it's better to write an executive summary. Ego is a very tricky thing. And I said, one of the reasons I realized the ego being very tricky was that when I started thinking about philanthropy, I met two young people who didn't have as much resources as I did, but were doing more than doing so much. And I felt distressed after I met them. And Mikey, you were one of the two people. And that experience sort of woke me up a little bit. So it's a really, really important reminder that yes, I could go from corporate to philanthropy. I can go from making more money to helping other people. But if I do not continue to work on myself and continue to work with my own sense, work with the fact that I don't love myself enough, really. At the end of the day, it comes down to that fact, that I do not accept myself fully. I could lose my way pretty easily. And I will still be in a lot of suffering, no matter whether I do nonprofit or for-profit. And that ego is something that it's still there today with me, still here today with me, and I'll hope to keep it in check so that I can speak from a different place today. And then one more thing I would say about suffering that I mentioned earlier is that the exercise that we did here today and the walking meditation is very powerful, and in some ways it almost it's like encapsulates one of the key challenges and opportunities we all have. That a lot of times we assume that only we suffer. First of all, a lot of times we don't even notice we suffer, and that's then when we notice that for example, I notice my eyes suffer, I actually don't assume other people suffer too. And that's why I was always surprised sometimes always surprised by the reaction to my sharing, because even though I was speaking from the heart and everything, but a part of me that still do not believe that what I feel matters, that other people would be moved because they have similar feelings, that they're just like me, and just sharing of those feelings and what we go through in our lives actually matter. And that's actually, in some ways, it's all that matters in our lives. And we forget that, and we end up, in some ways, objectifying other people in different ways. And that's, in some ways, is the deepest part of the deepest cause of the world's problems today. That we do not feel this humanity as we don't feel the connectedness with everybody else that we fundamentally actually know in our bones, but we just forget, and we just go about in our lives, doing things that to defend ourselves or to make other people like us, without realizing that, in fact, all we need to be is just be, and that's sufficient. So anyway, enough philosophy. Let me talk a little bit more about me. Okay, about me. Yeah, sharing a little bit about me. Okay, that sounds bad, right? Okay, let me talk about me. To hell with you guys, kind of thing. So I was born 44 years ago in China. Having meat on the table is a good event when I was growing up. Having seafood is a very rare event. I always remember Chinese New Year very fondly, because that's when we really have a good meal. Or I like weddings because we get invited to weddings, and that's when you get a really good meal. And I think that's common when I was growing up in China. It's not like my family is probably slightly below average, but it's pretty much the same everywhere. And I want to so the sense of growing up in China for my parents was this kind of survival, that we need to survive. My father was calculating everything down to the penny to make sure the ends meet, literally. And my father lost everything in the Cultural Revolution. He actually grew up in a rich family. Actually saw pictures of him, 10-year-old, in an electric car. Not a Tesla, but in a toy electric car that actually runs, on battery. Imagine 60 years ago. That's how rare that would have been in the U.S. Forget about China. He grew up in a very well-to-do family. But then in the Cultural Revolution, he lost everything. His father, and my grandfather died of cancer when he was in his teens, and the Cultural Revolution came, and anybody rich in China basically lost everything. Basically, literally the Red Guards, which were a little better than organized mobs, will come to your home and take everything away. Literally, just overnight, you'll just lose everything. And then he also lost his status, that the rich people is one of the five sort of quote unquote black five kinds kind of people that basically are the bottom of the untouchable of society. So he went down there. He couldn't go to college he wanted to because he had really good grades, but because this was one of the sort of untouchables, then he could only go to took the exam, even his score was good, that opportunity was taken away, he couldn't go to university. He basically lost everything. And the result was that he was very, very angry. Like, he has so much rage inside of him. And he took it out on me and my mother and my sister. And he, until I was probably 11, I just remember that he would just lose his temper randomly almost every day. If you heard of alcoholic fathers who lose their tempers after having drinks, he didn't need alcohol. He actually doesn't drink, but power to him, he can, without the help of drink, get into a rage anytime. And that was very, very scary for me. And at the same time, he's a math teacher, and he was very good at teaching math. So he taught me to do math using poker cards, playing cards. and we didn't have anything else. We didn't have enough spare paper, really, so you couldn't really even do math with paper. So he gave me a deck of cards, asked me to add it up. Initially, it was 10 cards added up, and over time, I add up 52 cards, with Jack being 11, Queen being 12, King being 13, and it could add up to 364, and that's 52 cards. And then he would take away one card, ask me to add up the rest, so that I then would know which card he took away, what's the number, right? And I was able to add up those cards eventually in 11 seconds. So 52 cards in 11 seconds, which is about 5 cards per second. I can barely move the cards fast enough. You think about 5 cards a second, right? And recently I read some neuroscience that says actually a brain takes about 100 to 200 milliseconds to recognize anything. Just to recognize a number, but the brain takes about 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds, which means that my brain was working at the highest capacity, recognizing each card, which it would take 200 milliseconds, and to add them up, parallel processing, adding them up. So I did really well in math, and won lots of math competitions in China, thanks to my father. I'll come back to it's easy. Well, I'll say something now and say it's my father is very much responsible for my success. I'm not sure I will be here today without his, whipping in some way, so figuratively or in a real way. But also there are a lot of things that left a mark that made me in ways that's less than my full self, or not realizing that I have my full self. So I got into Harvard College on a full scholarship from the junior year of my high school. I skipped the last year, came to US, and then studied, and then for the business school as well, and went back to China to start a company when I was 25 years old. This is almost 20 years ago. And then 4 years later, when I was 29, I sold my company and I retired. And I was very lucky. And then about 10 years ago, I started a venture capital firm, and I ran it part-time. And today we're one of the largest in China, and we invest in many unicorns. And last 2 weeks, actually I guess officially was last week, I officially announced that I'm no longer making new investments into these funds, into the new funds of the venture capital firm. The reaction was quite interesting. My partners were a little taken aback. They were quite surprised and didn't know what to say. The people who work for the fund, the junior partners and the associates, a lot of them were very enthusiastic. And they keep telling me, this is great you're doing, we want to help. And then last week, 2 days before Chinese New Year, I sent out an announcement to the 380 CEOs of our portfolio companies. And just to say goodbyes, so that they know what I'm doing, that I no longer won't be showing up as much. And the reaction is nothing short of amazing for me. Basically, I announced it at like 9:55 p.m. I sent it through WeChat. It was 9:55 p.m. China. It was like 6 p.m. here, 6 p.m. here, right? 6 a.m. here. I got up early at 6 a.m. here. And within a few minutes was picked up by a news media because one of the CEOs forwarded it. And at 10 o'clock p.m. And then overnight in China, it became probably the top news in China in the business circles. It was forwarded probably, my guess is tens of millions of times. And everybody I know today, everybody I know got forwarded that article, like they say dozens of times through the social network from different friends of friends. And I really didn't expect it. And it gave me a lot of hope that even a place in China where people are so occupied with making money, perhaps more so than, actually not perhaps, for sure, more so than even San Francisco or New York City, people had an interest, they were touched by it, and they wanted other people to know about it. And it gave me enormous amount of hope that that just like I said earlier, is that we all have those parts of us that yearn for more. That we all have this deep yearning for connection, for meaning. That even somebody that I was surprised, like people who I didn't know who were more successful than me financially will message me and say, "Oh, Bo, I heard what you're doing here, and I would love to be involved or learn about what you're doing." And it's particularly ironic to a part of me because one of the things I was afraid of by leaving the business world in China, or saying sort of quasi goodbye to it, was that I'll become not important. This part of my ego said, Bo, if you don't do this $3 billion fund thing, and you continue to invest and you control this money, and you can build your personal brand as a business, successful VC, that sort of thing, that nobody will care about you. Right? That you will start calling people won't answering your phone calls, and you become irrelevant. And that's the way, in some ways, it's a microcosm what I always believe about myself. That unless I'm number one or I'm better than everybody else in something, that nobody will want to talk to me or spend time with me. And that reaction, the fact that people, ironically, the people I thought would care less about me, they actually reach out to me not because I can make them money or somehow can bring a business deal to them, but because what I did touches them. It's a further proof that I'm on the right track. So that was my outer life. My inner life, the conscious inner journey started about 14 years ago, after I sold my company. I mentioned 29 years old. And at that time, I had absolutely everything, the pinnacle of life that people would dream about. Money, fame, power, and family. But the interesting thing is, I wasn't particularly fulfilled. I felt kind of empty. And I didn't even know what's causing me to feel empty, why I am sort of still have anxiousness and stress, that because on surface, I should have no stress. Everything is going well. I have everything that people would dream of. I thought about starting another company but I realized that actually, no matter what is it I do, I will still feel the same kind of emptiness or underlying stress that's always going to be there. So I was a little confused, and I was searching for something, but at that time, I didn't know what I was searching for. Then secondly, I have another source of confusion, is I became a father. I discovered that I was a terrible father. I always said to my wife, at that time when I had a public profile, in my profile I said, I'm a perfect husband, but I was an okay father. And in reality I think I was less than okay. I did not enjoy spending time with my kids. When I spent my time with kids, I was like, sort of really want to check email. I was judging, particularly my son, all the time about things he's not and why he's falling short of what I would want him to do, etc. And sometimes I was even physically punishing him. I remember one time he hit his younger sister We have 3 children, so my son is in the middle, hit his younger sister. And after I told him not to, many times he still did it. I actually had a talk with him the night before, and he did it the next day. I was so angry that I really lost it. I remember like I just pulling him, like literally lifting his one arm, throwing him on the bed, and like just spanking him, like in a controlled way. It wasn't like even I had this rage that's probably similar to what my father had. And I remember afterwards, I felt, this was the thing is, it wasn't the first time, and wasn't the last time I did it. And I remember I felt like after, I remember walking into the living room from the bedroom where I did it, and I felt like literally like my bones were all collapsed or became soft. I just couldn't even stand. I was so distraught, and I hated myself at that moment. But also I felt like I couldn't do anything about it. It just like was this hopelessness, and this is the way, I assume this is the way it is. But I hated it, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I just almost like wanted to kill myself. So that added to my confusion. It's like, supposedly I was at the top of everything, but why is it that I could not, at that moment I was focused on happiness, but today I will phrase it is that why do I feel so much pain? Why did I feel so much pain? And why do I suffer so much? So from that point on, I started a journey of inner work. It started very, very slowly. And thanks to 2 people, that's the reason I started doing it. One is my wife, and because I loved her unconditionally, and still love her of course, unconditionally, and she loved me and still loves me unconditionally. And with that love, I could start there to look at something and to examine myself and maybe finding something different about me. Because if I didn't have that, I don't think I would risk losing everything I have. Right? Because the thing is about, if I start finding a different self-image, if I start changing my worldview, in the existing worldview, I was on top of the world. What if in the new world thing, what if I'm nothing? What if I'm much less important, to the extent being important still matters? What if I'm less important in the new worldview? What if nobody will like me now? At least before, I don't know whether people like me or not, at least people respected me. They want something from me. I have quote unquote a lot of people who like me. Right? What if in the new world, nobody likes me? Right? And I don't even have money to attract them anymore. Right? Money doesn't matter in the new world. So that was, so Jenny, my wife, was instrumental. Without her, I'm 100% sure I wouldn't be here today. And then the second person was Oleg, my friend, and also my partner in the new fund and in every way. He's been on a journey for longer than I have. And I don't know what he thought when he saw me, the way I was at that time. But I remember he told me one thing that I really was very hurt by. And I remember we were living in France at the time. I think my son Alex forgot to do some kind of a homework or something. And he came to me very remorseful and crying. And I stared at my son, just like really coldly, like, you got to do it. Like, he was crying, like, why didn't you do it? You go do it now. Something like that. Just like completely just matter of fact, cold, completely disregarding how he was feeling. Just he needs to do the right thing. That's it. And afterwards, I remember Oleg is here today, and my wife is here too, though I'm not sure they want to be pointed out. But and Oleg told me that, like, you looked inhuman. I'm not even sure he said, look, he might have said, you are inhuman or something. And, and I was really hurt by it. It's like, that's like a big indictment, right? Like being inhuman. And he gave me those little feedback and introduced me to some teacher in here and there. But it took me forever to be willing to even talk to a teacher, or even talk to him. And just like I remember that we were somewhere in a business trip I think in Phoenix, and he told me like, hey, Bo, let's find a quiet time to talk. And I said, no, why do we need to talk? I said, like, we're men. Like, we don't need to talk. Like, and I remember saying, like, I think at the restaurant, I said, do you think I'm gay? I'm not willing to talk. Why do you talk? So, but of course, gay or not, we all need to talk. So it took me a long time. I was sort of, I don't want to say dragged, but I was subtly sort of encouraged to explore, and took me a long time. In the first few years, I was maybe talking to one teacher once a year or something, and then maybe one was once a quarter. And I remember there's a kind of resentment that if he suggests yet another talk within 1 month, that I'm supposed to talk to 2 teachers or talk to the same teacher twice, like I feel resentful. It's not just I didn't want to do it. I felt resentful. As if like there's something wrong with me, that he's, of course I do think there's something wrong with the ego. There's nothing wrong with me now, I realize, but there's something wrong with the structure that I built. So to make a long story short, it took me, really 14 years to here today. I see that as an exponential growth. That if you're familiar with exponential growth, before the sort of the uptick, everything looked basically completely flat. But it was growing. It's just the base was so low, and my base was really, really low, very low. But the past couple of years has been really amazing. It just it feels like every few months I grew, and in most of the time today, I feel like I'm in the state of, just, I wouldn't say bliss. That's too much, and that's also too woo. But I feel like everything's very aligned in my life. Like my relationship with my kids today I'm definitely at least 80. My wife would say I'm 90 now out of 100 as a father. And I just started having everything just seems to flow together in a very aligned way, that I don't have to make too much effort, and things seems to come to me. And people used to say that. It's like, if your life is aligned with what your purpose is, and things just naturally occur. And that has been, proven true in my case, in my own personal experience. And along the way, I made 4 discoveries, and I'd like to share those 4 discoveries with you. And I have 10 minutes to do it. And we can talk more afterward. The first discovery, and I alluded to some of these discoveries already, alluded to them. The first one is that what I thought of myself is not the real me. And very likely what you think of yourself is not the real you. I thought of myself as cold, calculating, smart, fair, do not need friends, and I think that's about it. And what turns out is I constructed that self so that, first of all, other people will like me. First starting with my parents, and then my classmates and my teachers and friends or other people. And secondly is to avoid being hurt. Until 2 years ago, I never called anybody a friend. Never, because I was so afraid that they will tell me that they are not my friend. And I remember when I got into elementary school initially, I was so socially, just my parents never told me how to, my heart was closed. I remember a child asked me, a classmate asked me, like, who's your friend, Bo? And I was stumped. I was like so afraid of that question, but he asked me. And I picked two people out of the class and say, I even remember at least one person, one of the two people I picked. I said, so-and-so are my friends. I picked two popular kids. And in research, that was a mistake. Right? If I have to pick, I should pick not a popular kid, so that more likely they will say they're my friend. Right? I picked two popular people thinking, well, the law of numbers, right? They're more likely. I don't know what I was thinking anyway. So, but then a few days later, I remember one of them, two people, I remember his name, how he looked like. He asked me, like, Bo, you said you told someone I'm your friend. Like, why do you say that? Like, I'm not your friend. And I was so mortified. I mean, mortified would be the right word. I just wanted it to disappear. It was just so, and I never called anybody a friend again, ever, until 2 years ago. And when I see people writing emails like, hey, my friend, or your friend, whatever, it's like, how do they dare to, it's like, it's so, how much, why do they have so much courage? You can say, my friend, like some people address people instead of dear so-and-so, or hi so-and-so, they say, hey, my friend, right? No, now I've become one of those people now, so. But until 2 years ago, I couldn't understand how people could even do that. So I realize now today, though, that also another thing that I know, I thought I wasn't funny, and also I didn't know how to dance, all sorts of things I had, these beliefs that turned out to be not true. And that's the discovery number one. That in fact, as I go deeper, and as all of you are going deeper, I'm sure, that I discovered that there is this, you can call it the soul, or in the Diamond Approach I'm a member of, that I follow is the pro, or whatever it is, there is part of us that's universal, connected, and perfect. And the experience of that is so profound. And I wish I could experience it all the time, but unfortunately I don't. And I hope I have to experience it more and more every day, or at least once a week. That would be nice. But that's the first discovery. The second discovery is that the heart matters as much as the mind, and maybe matters more. I used to believe that it's all about the mind. In fact, it's not always the only thing exists is the mind. Is our intellect, is the reason we are alive, and that's all we are. Everything else is a noise, or an unnecessary kind of side effect, right? And frankly, that's how a lot of people, I think, today, people in Silicon Valley believe. People who do AI research, people who want to upload themselves to the computer so they can live forever. That's pretty much what they believe, that the intellect, the algorithms, is the reason we are here. Making new discoveries about science, that all sounds exciting. But there's nothing else that matters. And what I discovered is that the heart matters as much as the mind, perhaps more. And my heart, I remember a specific moment when, probably one of many, where my heart closed. And perhaps at that moment was a fairly seminal, permanent kind of a moment, was when my father was really angry at me for no reason. I remember there was one day, like usually he had the reason, at least has some kind of excuse. Like I did something wrong, I didn't get 100, I only got 99 out of 100 in the math test. He had a reason to be upset. Like, how could I make that kind of mistake? But there was one day, I think he did just something just completely so unreasonable, and he was just letting himself go at me. And in that moment, I remember thinking, there's some kind of, almost like a physical sensation of clunk, that I felt something happened in me. It's like, oh, the world is not what I thought it was. That this world, there's something I now understand. The world is not what I thought it was like. And so that from that moment on, I think my heart was more closed. And I think probably more things happened that I don't recall, or things happened before. But that moment I recall that my heart closed. And as I open my heart now, and there are experiences that I won't go into now, but just that it's the most profound and beautiful moment when our heart can open to a stranger or to anybody. And that makes my life worth living to a large extent. And we could open our hearts to anyone, not just our family or friends, but to anyone. In fact, looking into the other person's eyes is a great exercise to try to do that. The third discovery I made was that when the heart opens, the wisdom flows through. I said that I had two sources of confusion. One was my sort of why wasn't I happy and with all this stuff, and secondly was, why am I such a bad father? Why do I suffer, and why causing suffering around me? One of the hardest things for me to deal with as a father was when my son got angry. And when he was young, he got angry a lot, which is very understandable because he didn't get much love from me. He was angry almost every day. We actually were afraid to bring friends' kids to our house because almost every single time he would pick a fight with one of the guests. And when he got angry, it was very hard to deal with. He has this look and it really triggers me. And most reactions, either I usually say, just stop. You are not allowed to be angry. By the way, that's exactly what my father said to me. Even though he was a rageaholic, he did not allow me to be angry at all. Just like children are not allowed to be angry. And that's what I did. Then I grew a little bit. I said, okay, maybe I'll sit with him. That's what I was like, don't say anything, just sit with him. And that was the right thing to do. But it was so hard. When he was angry, I would go sit with him for 15 minutes or so that he can calm down. I try to control myself not to say you're not allowed to be angry. I try not to scold him. I try not to explain to him, just to hold him. And after 15 minutes, he calms down. And I was half dead after 15 minutes. I mean, it's like I was so tired. I was just so tired that I literally had to go take a nap. I'll tell Jenny, my wife, and say, okay, he's not angry anymore. Now you can take him. Because it's even harder for my wife to deal with anger than I was. It's like, now he's not angry enough. Just take him. I gotta go sleep. I had to go sleep. It was so hard because I had to almost have to clamp down on the muscles that I was used to using when in those situations. But today, first of all, he doesn't get angry much at all, but if he ever did get angry, I just sit with him and I hold him. I don't have to think about. My mind doesn't have to work. I don't have to think about what to say. Things will just naturally come out. Whether I hold it naturally or I felt like I go into this emptiness state. It's a different emptiness. I go into this quiet state, and I calm down, and things will just flow out or not flow out, whichever, and have this faith that I'll just be there with him, that he will be fine. And after 10, 20, 15 minutes, he will calm down for sure. But then, instead of being half dead, I was double alive. I would be feeling so good. I will feel so much energy as if I just went to a 1 week-long meditation retreat. I think my son, in some ways, was my best teacher. I mean, he taught me to open my heart, and without him, I'm not sure ever I would have the resolve to do the work I did. And a lot of times today, often actually, for a while, Alex telling me that I saved his life. And he's only, when he said it was only 11 or 12. So to break the chain of suffering that's passed from generation to generation, from my father to me, and probably from my grandfather to my father to me and to my son. And then on the purpose of life part, I'll try to make it short, is that the things I'm doing now, the fund, it just feels so natural to do. That just when Oleg and we initially discussing it, it was okay, is it gonna happen or not? But Now it's like, of course we'll do this. And and people come to us. It just out of the woodworks are people who are helping us or people who are building great companies we want to be part of. It's just things just flowing in a way that, and the purpose, I don't really, I don't ask the question, what's the purpose of my life nearly as often. I still do ask sometimes, I have to admit, but not nearly as often as I did before. And the last one, just to close, is that brings to a natural part to the fund, which we can talk about later, is that the fourth thing I discovered is that it's actually possible to help others grow. I used to think, the first belief was I never would grow. Like, it's just not possible. I discovered that. That's not true. But furthermore, what I found was that it's actually possible to use technology and other things to help other people grow. And of course, they have to have this inclination opening. And I think everybody has their inclination opening in different moments, depending on the circumstances. But if we can provide those tools to them at the right moment, in an accessible way, in a non-threatening way, in a safe way, everybody could grow. And we can help them. And we can be of service to other people to help them grow. And I think that's what, I guess giving me purpose today now. And that's what, to a large extent, what Mikey or the conscious hacking community is working on, is to helping other grow. And what we hope to do here, my partners and I, we are hoping to contribute and be of service to this movement, and partly by providing capital for which maximizing return is not the most important thing. The capitalism we know today, my traditional venture capital firm, assumes that maximizing shareholder value is the only thing that matters for companies. And that grows out of a belief in some ways that for a person, maximizing personal wealth, that's the only thing that matters. But for us, creating sustainable companies are important. Creating scalable companies are important. But maximizing profit is not the main reason for a company. And we hope to provide the kind of capital that will take that pressure away from entrepreneurs so that they continue to pursue their dreams of a mission that they started the company with. And also, we hope to continue to do our inner work along with the entrepreneurs. Because as I said earlier in the beginning, the egos are very tricky bastards. And we have to continue to work on ourselves, both as an investor and entrepreneur, so that we can keep our hearts pure and keep our hearts open. Thank you.